Alright, so now I'm fixing up a jig to cut the slot out of the front of the nose rib. Shouldn't it be called a rib nose? You'd think so, but they're called nose ribs. Doesn't make sense, but that's the deal. So I'm going to cut a slot out of the front here to hold a piece of spruce that'll span the wing. And you can see it's 1/2 inch width. This is also a 1/2 inch width, and this is a 1/2 inch width. Well, I'm assuming it's 1/2 inch width. It's actually not marked here on the plans, but it's probably the same exact aluminum angle that goes here. So I can cut all three of these with the same dado setup. I'll just have the dado head raised higher above the surface of the table saw for this cut, since it's deeper, and I'll back it way down since these are shallower cuts. But I'll cut those using test pieces anyway. So that's what I'm working on now. So I've got this jig that I built. It's now attached to the miter fence, or the miter, I don't know what you call it, of the table saw here. So you can move this at an angle to cut miters. I've got it perpendicular to the travel of the saw. And the jig, you can see, is really simple. It just holds a nose rib, and this is parallel to the table. That's really what matters. Should be parallel to that too, but it holds the back of the rib parallel to the table, which would make this cut in line with the chord of the rib. So that's a simple jig. I'll just hold this in with my hand and run it through the table saw. You can see my final set of cutters there for the dado head. I've got the two outer cutters, which are full circles like a regular table saw blade. Then I've got these chippers, which is just, there's one here and there's one on the other side of the saw. And I've got two of those in here. Here's one, here's two, and I've got a couple little shims that I've added to adjust the width very precisely. These are very coarse adjustments to add and remove these chippers, but the shims let you adjust it more precisely. And the shims, well, actually let me show you the shims and the chippers. Here are the chippers, and they're different widths, which you can see it's just sort of part of a saw blade. And the camera doesn't want to focus on it anyway. You see that. And these are the shims, and they're maybe several thousandths thick for some of these, and some of them are very thin. Maybe just a thousandth or a couple thousandths. So that's the dado set. So you can see, after making a bunch of test cuts here, getting my dado head set up, I finally got the width and the height set, which is pretty good. It's not super tight. You can see I can just lift it off of there, but it's a really good fit. That'll leave me just a tiny bit of wiggle room when I assemble the wing, since it's not super tight. I think it's a really great fit. Actually, that's the one let's see, which one is the one. So these cuts here, I was working on the width, and then I got the width right, you can see there, but then I needed to adjust the depth, and I guess I came the other direction here. This must be the one I settled on. So it's a little bit fiddly to get the dado head set up, but once it's set up, you can get a real nice cut. So I'm doing some fine fitting on the cut in the nose rib, this cut right here. Just adjusting the dado set a tiny bit more. The width is good, and that's the trickiest part, I think, because you got to take blades off, put new blades on, put shims in there to get the width perfect. And I think I've got that really nice. The fit of this piece of spruce into that notch is really nice. but as you might be able to see, so I've got two ribs here clamped together, and I just lined up the curve on the outside of these ribs. Since I milled away the front of this rib to put this spruce piece in there, so I can see how far toward the front of the rib this spruce comes. And I don't know if you can tell, the nose of this rib comes a little bit further forward. The pencil, you can see, bumps into that. So I think this notch is a little deep. So I want to cut it shallower so that the very front of this piece of spruce comes to this point right here. And then what I'll do after I assemble the wing and put this piece of spruce in there and glue corner blocks in so it's permanent, I think I'll just take a hand plane and plane down these corners so it matches up better with this curve. This is probably overkill. It probably doesn't need to be perfect, but it should be pretty easy to adjust the dado head, lower the blade a little bit on the table saw, and get the front of this to line up with that. That's for the bottom wing, which is a straight wing. It's not swept. The top wing is swept. That'll be a little more interesting because half the ribs I'll have to cut this notch at a 6-degree angle like this. The other half I'll have to cut at a 6-degree angle like that because the wing is swept 6 degrees. So that'll be a little trickier. That's why I'm starting with these straight ones, because this is a little bit easier to cut. So, anywho, that's where I'm at now, is just adjusting that dado head to cut all these notches. And the width is the same for some other notches on the sides, the top and bottom of the ribs. So I'll just need to lower the cutter head to give a shallower cut, but the width will be the same as this, a 1/2 inch. So that'll be easier to adjust than it was to set up the dado head for this initial cut. So I lowered the blade a little bit, took another pass, and you can see, I think, that the spruce and the tip of the nose rib, the leading edge, are nice and flush. Right there. So I think that's going to be perfect. And I'll have just a tiny bit to knock off on those corners. That'll be real easy. Just a couple of swipes with the hand plane.